most of us have had it, I think, at least once.
Okay, just letting everyone know that we started to record the meeting.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Joan McIntyre, Chair of the Climate Change, Energy and Environment Commission. We'll start out with the introductions. If there's anybody from the public that would like to make public comment, please let me know. We can start with Stephen.
Sorry,
Just
sorry.
introduction.
Yeah, sorry. Sorry, I'm Stephen, I'm Stephen Galacio, I'm the commissioner.
I'm Elizabeth Whitney. I'm a new commissioner.
Rob Sandoli, Commissioner.
I'm Doug Snowinboss, Commissioner and Chair of the Energy Committee.
Jenna, if you want to
Jenna.
introduce yourself and maybe say a few words about yourself.
Hi, I'm Jenna Peabody. I recently joined the air team on Arlington County staff.
She's replacing Rebecca
Oh,
as our liaison.
Yep.
And
As the C2E2 liaison.
you've got a nice environment background. Prior to coming
Yes. I can expand on that. Yeah. Okay, so my background, I recently graduated with my master's in environmental and sustainability management from Georgetown University. And then during my time there, I worked on a pretty big capstone project with Amazon and their decarbonization project. And then prior to that, I worked for about 4 years up in Boston for different financial services and accounting and audit firms in their marketing departments. Most recently, I was with Deloitte in their sustainability, climate, and equity practice and built out that arm for their marketing team. So,
Welcome. Thank you.
Demetri McBride, Bureau Chief of the Office of Sustainability and Environmental Management.
David Evans, new Commissioner.
Cindy Lewin, Commissioner.
Carrie Thompson, Commissioner and Vice Chair of C2.
Mark,
Mark Greenwood, Commissioner.
Eric.
Hi, everyone. Eric Gibbs, Commissioner.
Okay, who else do we have on the line? I thought it was Paul Roman.
Can I ask you? He's one of our team members, but
Is anyone else from staff on?
No, he's not.
I'm sorry. Hi, Joan.
Hey there.
I had on my calendar that there was a committee meeting tonight that was going to talk about Plan Langston Boulevard, but I must have entered it incorrectly.
Not ours.
Not our, is,
Checked with them.
they have it up on the board up there.
I'll see a woman out there.
I think I just put it on my calendar. Sorry to interrupt you. Thank you.
Next Monday will be the planning commission on that.
Yeah, Monday. I'll see you Monday, Joan.
Okay, anybody else online that would like to introduce themselves? Okay, we could get started, no public comments, and I don't think we have the meetings, meeting minutes. Hi, Kevin.
Hi.
Want to introduce yourself? We're just finishing that.
Yes, I'm Kevin Vincent. I'm a member of the commission.
And Doug, I think you had a business issue on the EC members.
Yes, I did. So most of the EC members' terms have technically expired. So they should all be reappointed, would be my recommendation.
Energy Committee for.
I have a
for
list
new
of
people.
names,
Energy Committee.
the Energy Committee.
Maybe said that. Go ahead.
So I can read the names or we can
Yeah.
discuss with that, but if we need all the names. Doug Snowinboss, Claire Noakes, John Bloom, Scott Bordeaux, Greg Brozak, Stephanie Burns, Scott Dickey, Rick Keller, Christopher Kip Malinowski, Jonathan Morgenstein, Scott Sklar, Kevin Vincent, and we want to welcome Elizabeth Whitney and Suzanne Swink. So I would move that all these individuals be reappointed for 2-year terms to the Energy Committee.
Second. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, got that taken care of. All right.
And I do have just a couple quick announcements, if that's okay.
Mhm.
There is going to be the Committee of 100 is hosting a virtual climate panel on the evening of October 11th. And that runs from, I believe, 7 p.m. to 8:15. If you go on the Committee of 100 website, you can register for it, of course, free of charge.
Are you going to be participating in that? They didn't have much detail when I saw the announcement.
I'm going to be participating. I've been working with Devanshi Patel, and we're waiting to lock down a dozen panelists tomorrow, which if that happens, will be very exciting. So there's going to be a follow-up and information where they're going to give you detail.
Yeah, I just said.
And the second one is for those of you who did not hear, we couldn't really publicize it until the event this week, but we were advised by the USGBC early last Friday morning at around 7 a.m. that Arlington County is recertified as a LEED Platinum community. There were in this cycle an additional 54 applicants, including ours, because we had to reapply or lose the prior certification. In the 6 years since they launched the program 6 years ago, Arlington was one of the kind of nascent early communities they recognized. USGBC did what USGBC always does, which is raise the bar, raise the bar, raise the bar. So it was far more extensive. It was deeper. The criteria that had to be met were far more rigorous. And actually, out of all the applicants, Arlington County scored the highest. The other marine communities are Dayton, Ohio, Howard County, Maryland, and Santa Monica. And the county was recognized at their opening reception to the Greenbuild Conference on Wednesday, and today they were also Christian Dorsey spoke on a 3-party mayor's panel. So everyone is very happy about that. There'll be more press that goes out about it because USGBC, of course, also wants to engage.
Do they have kind of a scorecard that they produce and say, kind of what the criteria is and the rank?
Yeah. Paul Roman, I have to say, did most of the work, but I was supporting him and working with him. And it was just between that and the carbon disclosure project, it was around, I think, 75, 80 pages for USGBC, and it was 100 pages for the carbon disclosure project. So we're basically reported and dated out at this.
What is the carbon disclosure project? Not sure.
That is a global, and they rank A through G, I think. They have over 1,300 members worldwide. Approximately 11% of the members rank A, which is the highest ranking. And Arlington County is among.
Google that.
Yeah, and we're actually going through the kind of because the carbon disclosure project requires you to report and get recertified every single year. So we're in the process. We've submitted that application.
After you finish one application, you start on the next.
Sorry?
As soon as you finish one year, you can start on the next.
Yeah, we were actually juggling both of them at the same time. It was really kind of exhausting.
Yeah, but for this carbon disclosure, it sounds like you have to work on it year round. As soon as you finish one submission, you start working on the next year's.
That's a piece of work. It is, but it keeps you on your toes. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
Okay. That's it. That's all the, kind of the trip we got into this week.
Yeah, it's, somebody with your hand raised, so did you want to make a public comment?
Yes, that'd be fantastic.
Okay, could you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, my name is John Obenberger, resident of Arlington, Virginia.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to ask the group, given that your focus is on environmental, if you've reviewed the environmental impacts and implication of the planned Langston Boulevard study. The study that's been going out and is going to be going to the board for proposed change in the general land use plan has substantial upzoning in density that will be added. a significant adverse impact to traffic. And there's been no assessment of the proposed changes in land use. So if there's any group in Arlington that should be reviewing and requiring the staff to assess the environmental impacts, be it human impacts, noise, air quality, runoff, stormwater, impact and safety to individuals for walking. There's not going to be parking for the density being added. Folks are going to have to walk 6, 8, 10 blocks to try to find parking to walk to their neighbor within a neighborhood to either park in front of their house or an apartment building that will be built that will significantly adversely impact safety, especially if people are walking at night, dark. We know there's crime. People have been murdered walking to their cars at night. They've been fallen prey for people walking alone. So there's significant adverse impacts with what's being proposed. There's been no consideration of parking. The staff did a rudimentary back of the envelope analysis on traffic, and there'll be severe congestion. And they're proposing to take a lane away on one of the only east-west truck routes in Arlington County in Northern Virginia. It's an emergency evacuation route. It plays a role for safety and security for the country, as well as evacuation to DC. And the staff has given no consideration. The plan that's been released and that's been circulated makes no mention of the severe congestion, where substantial different tools have to be used to analyze the impacts of safety. They haven't used the right tools. The delays will be significant, decrease safety, as a result, increase emissions. And it's interesting, you're talking about carbon emissions, and nobody's batting an eye at the lack of analysis that's been gone into something substantial with the upzoning that's being proposed. So if you haven't reviewed it, I think you need to look at the environmental assessment that has or hasn't been done with the Planned Langston Boulevard study. Send a message as a chair to the board, the Arlington County Board, not to accept and make any changes to the general land use plan unless that assessment has been done to determine what the impacts are going to be on the community, and require 2 of the 5 areas to be included in the study before any changes are made to the general land use plan. Right now, only 3 of the 5 areas are being studied and no impacts have been done, and they want to change to the general land use plan for the county. So with that, I'm more than willing to answer any questions you all may have. If you're not familiar with what's required for environmental assessment of a transportation impact, which what they're proposing with taking a lane away on Langston Boulevard, I'd encourage you to get familiar with it pretty fast.
Thank you very much. We actually did put together a letter that we sent out after our meeting in July. Encourage you to go ahead and look at our website where you'll be able to find the letters that are posted there. So that would give you a good sense of our perspective and analysis of that particular plan.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we don't have the minute meetings from July yet.
And that's, I take that on my back, but what we did do is we brought ourselves current on your website with the meetings, the agendas, the video, the recordings, and the presentation.
So, right. Okay, so we can jump into our first substantive issue on transportation. Demetra, do you want to start with comments on the ARPA's feasibility study, and then we'll open it up for discussion? I hope everybody had a chance to look at the technical report, some of the discussion that and sharing of ideas that we did in advance.
Great. There is not a presentation on the full study for tonight. It has been, we have done a debriefing with the county manager's office He asked for additional questions. We went back and provided information. And it's sticking point now with socializing it publicly is that we haven't had the opportunity yet to brief the board. And that obviously is kind of backwards. So my understanding is the board's got a lot going on right now too, but within the next 2 to 3 weeks, we're hoping to have all of the 2x2 set up. So we would have the ability to come back with a presentation and that would provide the basis for a more fulsome analysis and discussion in October.
Have they done an update on the assessment based on the buses that have been purchased?
There's a couple of scenarios going on with that. So, and that's all I can say right now is that they're looking at a couple of scenarios on the buses.
Okay, because they're purchasing 580, 586, 688 or 588.
Yep.
So that should be the baseline of comparing to root block analysis as well as comparing.
Again, I kind of don't want to get out ahead
Yeah.
because, obviously with that, there's kind of ancillary interfacing and, co-sensitive issues that go into that. So again, that we'll be able to have a more comprehensive panoramic discussion. It'll take into account all the details in October.
Okay, any idea of, assume you're not going to want to tell us anything in terms of timeline for purchasing? My understanding is their consideration of accelerating the purchase on the hydrogen buses.
I can't because there are decisions, like I said, there are money scenarios. We really have to get through the 2x2s.
Now I did send in, I did kind of do an in-depth, trying to at least get some sense of how the analysis done in the technical report translated into the due. And I can't figure out how to get the numbers to match up because, there's not enough information on how the math is done to go from original battery capacity, usable battery capacity in miles on the coldest day imaginable.
If you would like, I can put a placeholder that assuming we're going to be able to come back with a presentation on the entire study, we can bring also, not just us, in fact, I prefer if the consultant really drove the bulk of the presentation, but we can also tell them to be ready to answer more specific questions about the technical memorandum. Excuse me, I don't have COVID, it's allergies. So if everyone wants to develop in advance, kind of very specific, as you know, that was technical TM, then we can have them ready to respond to those and not saying, oh, we'll get back to you after.
Yeah, I mean, I've done mine and others have kind of looked at it as well. I mean, that was and the other question had to do is there appeared to be 9 phantom buses out there that weren't counted when you did the pairing, which, how are they being used operationally? I really like numbers to add up. Just something about that, maybe my analytical.
Well, are you saying that the numbers didn't add up or it's difficult to see what was the methodology to get to the numbers? I just want to be clear on what
I looked at the assumptions that you made in terms of making the adjustments from nominal battery capability to, actual, usable capability. And then they had some numbers of, on a cold winter day, this is the efficiency that you're going to get per kilowatt hour. And I've worked through all those. Those are pretty simple, multiply this by this, by this, and then divide everything by 3 point something or other to get a number. And then again, there's nothing in the technical report that ever says how much is the maximum range for the 2 bus batteries they looked at. And I mean, it's like, okay, you've got that, you've got different buses. So can I apply that methodology? And I couldn't make it work. So there's either something that wasn't identified in the assumptions. And again, these numbers keep changing, but then the other one was on the route pairing. Is that they only did route pairing based on 55 buses, and we know that there's 78 buses in the fleet, and even taking into account that 20% is in reserve, you've still got, so how are those accounted for, and don't they have the chance? Plus, there should be an opportunity for midday charging for at least some of those buses. Okay, I've talked enough. How about opening up this to others? In terms of any impressions of looking at it, I think Elizabeth.
Yeah, I emailed a couple of my concerns to the group, but just to make sure it's in the record. I'm also concerned about the idea that you need more than one battery electric bus to replace the CNG. It seems to me, and I'm not as good at math as Joan is, but it seems to me that the sort of baseline calculations were made with a smaller capacity battery than we would buy going forward. And then those assumptions just kind of get baked into the rest of the analysis all the way through. And then it just sort of pile on that, oh, we would need more facilities and more parking space, you know. So I think it's really important to get that piece right, to figure out, you know, if there is something other than a 1-to-1 ratio. It does become really important to figure that out before a decision is made. The other thing that I was pretty concerned about was the idea of constructing a natural gas plant to provide capacity to charge the buses in an outage situation. I didn't actually see much analysis of that decision at all. I'm sure it's somewhere. I'm sure somebody did that math. But I would like to see if they considered all the tax credits that were available through the Inflation Reduction Act and opportunities through the infrastructure bill to make standalone storage much more affordable. We're seeing the economics change quite a bit. And I would think that for the vision of the zero emission fleet, it would be really important to also have zero emission backup generation. I also didn't see anywhere any kind of analysis of the sort of secondary or tertiary benefits of having a fleet of battery electric buses and what that might do for grid resilience and reliability overall for the county.
Actually, just you're talking about vehicle to grid.
Yeah.
Vehicle to grid actually doesn't work with metro transit buses as a rule of thumb because they basically,
they're running all the time.
they run all the time. So they run down the charge. Where that has a possibility, and I know that 8 years ago, we were all getting really excited about vehicle to grid. They're saying that it has a better chance that people have even tempered their expectations on school buses for obvious reasons. So we're looking to, you know, we've got the 3 buses for APS that are on order, and those are going to run a pilot. So that's one of the things that we'd be very, very interested to check out, because it would be great if we could build resilience through a fleet.
Yeah.
Just I'm not sure the transit fleet is going to
Yeah.
quite provide it.
I'd love to see maybe even a little note to that effect, to know that it was considered as part of the analysis and that it wasn't forgotten or not considered at all. Another possibility is, you know, either a mobile battery or using some of the buses for emergency resilience, you know, in, you know, extreme weather where we might have to make a decision between, you know, powering an emergency shelter and running all the bus routes. Certainly having a fleet of battery electric buses might come in handy. So just some additional thoughts to consider.
Just to note that, and this is going to be coming up soon as well, is that the energy assurance plan really covers kind of hubs, resiliency hubs, and measures for inoperability or complete interruption of the grid for at least 3 days. And Rich Dooley did an exceptional job on that plan. So that is going to be coming up. So that crosses over. I mean, nothing, as you know, just exists in a vacuum. The only thing, and just, be ready to have those questions and hear some kind of answers, that the more battery storage that we put, in Arlington space is always just the, eternal quest. The more battery storage that we put at a space, or more infrastructure that we have to put at a space, the larger the battery, obviously, you're going to have more charging infrastructure. The space is so constrained that infrastructure starts competing with the parking spaces for the buses. So when they say that there's a saturation point at which you have to start really looking for additional space, I think that additional space is inevitable in the future if, more and more people, as we would like them to do, start adopting multimodalism and public transportation more. But just know that right now, those things are competing, and we will have to add in significant infrastructure, because I think, don't quote me, between the light maintenance facility and the AOMF, I think it's between 17 and $19 million that we have to pay Dominion to put in the additional infrastructure to handle the grid on the lower size batteries. So we're already dealing with them on upgrading that, because I wouldn't expect the grid to have been sitting around with that kind of excess capacity, but we have to put in additional infrastructure if you want to put in 6 passenger vehicle chargers.
Someone needs to procure that capacity, whether it's the county or Dominion. I guess for me, my bottom line would be, if this plan goes forward, including a recommendation to construct a natural gas generation facility, I think there's no way that we can possibly support
That's
something
separate
like
and
that.
apart from the AOMF. And again, just really quickly, that is really the solid waste master plan. That's the next phase of it. It's going to the water pollution treatment plant. And actually, that is, in terms of greenhouse gas emissions, is an improvement over what happens now, because there's enormous leakage in the way that biowastes are delivered and dealt with at the plant right now. So they're upgrading that facility to have a closed system. That system and that capacity will also eliminate substantially, almost entirely, the methane flares that they have to let off too.
Okay.
So that's happening anyway, and it can be used either to fuel buses, or it can just go and be like net metered into the pipeline.
So the natural gas facility that's referenced in the ART feasibility study
Yeah.
is something that has other applications that wouldn't be constructed exclusively for this purpose.
No.
Okay.
Yeah, you're talking about the RNG. facility. Yeah, no, it's actually, I think the greater question on that is, we're gonna be producing RNG, what's the best use for it? And whether or not it's, is a substitute for, as providing backup generation for this facility versus, again, there are a lot of different options, and you're also right across the street, essentially, from National
Yeah.
Airport, and they might have a use for RNG as well, and those are much harder to decarbonize.
And I haven't had the time to look into it, but I know in the Infrastructure Act, I had set up a not insignificant amount of funding to be able to upgrade the pipe systems to address leakage.
Well, we probably want to have the next gen, or the program doing the waste facility come in the next few months or so. Talk about what they're doing. I think, since especially most of this has been on the line for a number of years, but since most of our commissioners are relatively new, it'd be good to get everybody updated. Other comments on the ART bus feasibility study? Yes.
Yeah, just, I know we're taking a lot of time on this, so I'll just endorse the comments that have been made so far and just ask the question of peer review for this study. I know it's expensive consultant study already, did internal review. We paying for anyone a second set of eyes to look at the study itself?
We haven't done peer review because that's very, very, very rare in government. If you want peer review, you can make that request or recommendation to the board. Obviously, that's a kind of pseudo policy set, decision that I'm not entitled to make. I can tell you that the study is consistent with just about every other single study. And when you see the full study, you'll see a lot of benchmarking with other jurisdictions and other districts. But again, I don't want to get ahead of my skis on that one. Let me just put it this way, unless there's a real priority, assuming we are able to come back, we are able to sit with the board and come back to you in October, my guess is a lot of your time in October is going to be taken up on that subject. Because you do have really great substantive questions.
Should we make a list of the questions so that they're in one place and so that they can look at them in advance so we can be sure to get answers because they've been raised in the letter and.
That's what I would say. I'm kind of, because you said, yeah, there's some in a letter from February, there's some in, recent minutes from meetings, there's some in the emails.
But no opportunity.
And I'd love to
get
kind of
feedback.
collect them in one place, because the thing that it's not that, we're trying to find out in advance what the questions are. I'm just worried that these questions are so technical that if people don't have the reference points or anything right with them, you're going to sit there in the meeting and we're going to have to say, oh, we'll
That's
get
why
back to you with that, get back to you with that.
Kevin, I think you were going to.
Yeah, I actually didn't read anything other than Joan's very thorough analysis of what she had read, but we have been raising, and I haven't seen any response, the points now for more than a year. I think it's been coming on a couple of years. Dragging on, that it's going to be a flawed analysis to assume that all buses have to run the same routes, which I think is still in there, because there are some routes that are going to be very easy for electric drive and other routes are more problematic. And so you fundamentally cook the books essentially by making that assumption instead of doing a logical deployment of the easiest routes first or the ones you electrify. And then the study based on what was at the time looking like it was going to be the obsolete powered batteries instead of what we're actually buying now is something, we were predicting then, and it's coming true that we ended up buying much better than what had been analyzed. So these are not new points. We've documented them several times, and it's frustrating to me if the report that comes out still is ignoring comments that we've been issuing for now more than a year. So it's good to package them all up together, but it's also useful to know just how long we've been raising these points about the methodology that was being used to lead to the conclusion, I think, that Arlington County didn't want to electrify buses, and it's very problematic if that's what we're going to be briefed on in October, and we'll be arguing with the study at that point.
And we have Eric Gibbs.
Yeah, I have a plethora of questions, which would probably take up the rest of our time tonight. So I won't pose them here. Carrie, excuse me, I think you had a good suggestion. I will note that a lot of these questions are the same questions that we've been asking for months, if not going back to when I joined the commission, I think a year ago. So Carrie, I think it's a good suggestion to put all the questions together and not spend probably any more time here. Thank you.
Thanks, Eric. Mark, any comments? Anybody else have any additional comments?
I would just want to say, I think it would be helpful to have that list of questions. I think there's no reason that our next meeting needs to be adversarial. We could give them those questions in advance, and anything they can answer quickly
more efficient,
or clarify quickly would be wonderful for them to be able to do in advance, as long as their answers are ultimately satisfying to the commission.
I can start up a Google Doc and start posting with some of mine. The other kind of end with one final thought or comment is that based on, basically based on the conclusions that they came to, if we were looking at the 550, because I think we can ignore any of the results from the 440 at this point, because the 550 is less than what we're actually buying, is that the conclusion was that 72 or 73% of the routes could be covered on the coldest day. And 62 some point some could cover of the route pairings, which is a more challenging issue, could be covered with that bus. So, with those types of conclusions, every other feasibility study I've looked at has concluded that's good enough to start to make the transition to electric buses, because we know the technology is going better. We know that there are other options for managing the fleet, as well as, in-route charging and other midday charging and things like that, there's no reason to consider hydrogen buses at this point. Again, if you dig into the study, is the numbers for hydrogen buses are consistently higher than anything else in terms of cost. And those life cycle costs really need to be laid out.
I'm sorry, the point you made about the hydrogen bus, I think we really need a definitive answer about what the schedule is.
Yeah.
And if you can't get it to me, you tell us who we need to ask it from, because I think the county, we need to inform that decision before that money is
And
locked.
if it happens before we get answers to our questions, that'll be pretty frustrating to the commission that we've raised it, including some time ago.
Okay, all right, like in terms of the carbon neutral transportation master plan.
Okay, I know we're running a little behind, so I will go through this quickly. This is a sampling, an overview of the structure and the purpose and the objectives of the plan, and then just a sampling of the analysis that we did in connection with one of the primary parts of it, which is planning out and mapping out scenarios for the public EV access, charging network across the county. Because we do have an extraordinary number of chargers already in the county, as with every place else, but is it having at least 20% in any given day of the week or moment? Don't worry.
It's higher. That's a number that's circulated, but
And-
my anecdotal experience is
And I personally think that 20% may be low.
Yeah.
But the other problem is that a lot of the chargers are in structures where there's some payment for access, or there's no access at all, if it's a private condo building. Also, the cost for retrofitting an existing building, we've had several who've been doing a separate study, it's just proving to be prohibitively expensive with the current technology. So if we can go up to the beginning. So these are just the, and I'm not going to read the slides, but we've done technical memorandum prepared. We're a little over halfway through with this study. It is designed so that it should be complete by the end of November, beginning of December. When I say complete, there's an asterisk there. It's pre-board, consideration. So when I say complete, it's a complete draft to go out and start, addressing stakeholder comments and responses.
Make a quick question.
Sure.
So the art bus transition is not incorporated in this overall master
Yeah,
plan?
it's not incorporated in this. What this does include, though, is we did add APS, or
Yeah.
the school bus fleet.
That's unusual. That it includes APS, but not the art.
Well, the APS, that feasibility study was really so specific, and it was looking at specific technology, and it was looking at setting up the data field for public discourse and discussion and decision-making on the transition of that fleet. This is really, you'll see in the key objectives, which I think we can go up to. We've developed our these are the high-level overarching goals, which is to reduce the reliance on single occupancy vehicles. So the overarching purpose is to, first of all, transition more people into multimodalism and micromobility, facilitate an array of EV charging networks, because we're finding that obviously there's still, even in areas such as ours, there's a real hesitancy to really take the jump and buy an electric vehicle because of what people don't know. There's range anxiety, there's charging anxiety. We have a lot of areas, like I said, the pre-existing buildings. We even have single-family neighborhoods that have no garages and no driveways. So really to help facilitate this transition to electrification of people's, personal, absolute personal transportation by giving that, by relieving these ambiguities. And then also to support phased decarbonization of the county fleet. What we've done through a series of internal stakeholder meetings across the county and multiple departments is put together just initial measures for each of these primary. So there's measures, action that roll up into the key initiatives. And this is, as I said, if you want, because I'm trying to make up time and we can certainly discuss any of these now that you want. But it is now already on your website. We're trying to get ahead of things now that we have Jenna. So if there are other things that it doesn't mean that that substitutes for public engagement, we're obviously looking forward to having public.
What's on the, is the assessment or the detailed memorandum or just PowerPoint is on our
This PowerPoint.
this PowerPoint, yeah.
So what, I mean, you're talking about multimodalism, micromobility, transit obviously plays into that. Both, I think microtransit, as you mentioned in our letter, but also just for better transportation options is how much is this going to actually really look at where people go and where they might be transit and how you could use these other options as a, help to lure people away from their car, because this is a huge behavioral change.
We're hoping that the analysis that we've done in connection with the EV-SC network, the charging network, is going to be translatable, or we can migrate that to those types of questions. Because as you'll see, what we did is we said, okay, here are the places where we have government sites that have public accessibility and we can have public use. But that's not sufficient. We need to, so there's going to be multiple layers, and we have to start looking at obviously private sector, areas. But rather than just randomly take a guess, there's an analysis that we've done, and I'm just summarizing it probably pretty crudely, is looking in each district and studying traffic patterns for origin destination. And then we started matching up destinations for where people go. If they go for athletic fields for kids to go, if they go for, entertainment, if they go to a movie. So there would be chunks of time where they go for grocery shopping, where people would be that we could start developing public-private partnerships to incentivize or to instigate kind of more of that charging network along that. But it's that analysis to start pinpointing who we go to and start having those discussions. So you'll see, examples of that analysis shortly.
Demetra, were the 3 goals created somewhat a priori, or is it the result of data, transportation use and transportation mode use that led to the conclusion that having goals in these 3 areas is what will get us to greater carbon neutrality, including with prioritization?
It was a combination of benchmarking and also looking at specific characteristics, because quite frankly, it's not to say that we don't have electric vehicle uptake in our market, but it's not as high as you would expect out of a community. It's pretty average. It's out at around 4%, 4.5%. And we were expecting it to be up around 7 at least. The majority of the electric vehicles are Teslas.
Because you have a lot of security about the charging. I've never not gotten it.
And that's it. And it's also, this is going to be used to inform a lot of public engagement too. Because I'm going to jump around, but I think that Doug wants to have a very fulsome discussion about greenhouse gas inventory. And Claire has brought up a couple of suggestions that really go towards a consumption-based inventory. We would recommend not using a purely consumption-based inventory because for the most part, it's not measurable or accountable. But what it's really, really good for is using those measures for public information and really persuading the public to make their choices. So we're really hoping that by alleviating the ambiguity, but we also need to be very strategic about outreach. I would guess it's the same here in California, believe it or not, in the Bay Area. One of the biggest obstacles to EV uptake was that there weren't any salesmen on the lots that really knew about electric vehicles.
Yeah.
And when somebody walked on and said, we were considering, I don't know, maybe we buy an electric vehicle, and they had a couple of basic questions that the salespeople on the lot could answer. So it really suppresses that. So there are things that, we're going to do there, but it was a combination of benchmarking because there are trends, people's psychology is pretty consistent, but then also match for the characteristics here and really doing a data dive on kind of like, well, what's our percentage? Where are they located? Where are they not located?
Now, are there going to be some overarching goals? I mean, what percentage drop would we like to see for single occupancy vehicles? With the related increase in micromobility as well as transit use. And again, kind of setting the goals for what you're trying to achieve, and then you can actually then easier to count that in terms of what does that mean in terms of decarbonization?
At first we did have one of the primary goals, we had a fourth one, which was reducing the number of cars per household. Because we have households here, and it's not infrequent that a household has 4 cars, which is pretty wild. But
I don't even think you have to do that. All you have to do is say we want to see reduced vehicle traffic. Because if people find they're not using their cars, they may not have as many. So again, because if you just flat out say we want to get people to stop, or buy fewer cars, they're going to say you're going to take my car away. I mean, it's kind of silly when nobody's trying to do that, but it's, again, let's make it, and it's that way in anything that relates to reducing greenhouse gas emissions. How do we make it really easy for people to change their behaviors and habits? And this is probably one of the hardest things to change because it is just so convenient, and especially when options. I mean, I went from my house in Cherrydale, I was over back near Chain Bridge. I just, for curiosity, looked to see how long it would take by public transportation to get home. And it was going to be almost an hour, including a 27-minute walk to a bus stop, and then another 15-minute walk home.
Not at all on the weekend.
And
and that's the kind of thing that you have to kind of figure out, think differently from the way we're doing transit now. So that, I can just plug it in and something will show up at the nearest corner and I'm on my way. And connect with more used routes or whatever. But, it's again, and I'm one that at least tries to use public transportation.
it's one of the reasons, and I know it's a little frustrating. It's frustrating for me. I've seen it in other places, but I've seen other places that are a little bit more consolidated. But these plans interface, and that part is really not exclusively, but it's the primary function of the transit strategic plan.
Right, but that's not in our transit strategic plan. Again, we commented on that last month. There's nothing about climate change. There's nothing, it's always a kind of a wish of, we'll make it a little bit more convenient. And I think in some areas it probably does,
Yes.
But it doesn't address the issue that I'm raising of, it makes it easier for, in some cases, for people that are already using public transportation. I don't think it addresses the issue of how do you make it easier for people that don't use it? Or
Well,
don't,
I saw it, and I'll go back and take another look at it. Because of the volume of the studies that I've been reading lately. But I thought that they were also talking about strategically increasing the number of routes and also increasing or shortening the turnaround time. Because a lot of the hesitancy for public transportation is it just takes too long.
And in some areas where there's morning and evening, it would be all day. But, when you get, especially north of Langston Boulevard, nobody's riding those buses. And I don't think having them all day running every half hour is going to increase your ridership that much. So again, it's we need a transportation plan, and this all needs to be kind of fit into as we're thinking of carbon neutral transportation. Because it's probably 50% electrification, 50% changing people's behaviors.
I don't recall seeing this in the plan. I don't know if recirculator, if I'm thinking the right thing, but one idea that I'd be interested to know if it was considered as something that DC did. I can't remember how long ago, it might have been like 15 years, but in addition to their bus routes, which are really comprehensive, they also have the circulators, which are a completely different
Yeah,
brand
right.
that are just running up and down these major thoroughfares,
Yeah.
kind of driving, towards metros. And when I think about, art buses, it's wonderful to have those options, but I think for me to not take my car somewhere, it has to be really pretty fast. And so having like micro routes, that, I'm just too far to walk to East Falls Church, but a mile and a half, just going up and down, Williamsburg Boulevard, or some of these smaller routes, where there's very little ridership. It has to be differently designed for a different population that's not going to be relying on a bus for their total transportation needs all the time to make it a viable option. It just needs to be a lot more frequent. And I think you can do that with shorter targeted routes that are, going straight to the metro.
Or micro transit where it's on demand.
Maybe trolleys.
First last
Yeah,
mile,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
I think one of the biggest inhibitors of regularly using a bus is frequency and not knowing, okay, do I need a token? How much does it cost? I don't know how to use it. So I think I'll just take my car. And if we had a circulator that was subsidized by other regular routes that was a hop on, hop off for free, I bet we would increase ridership.
And we may be getting some of those circulator routes, off ramp to us.
Yeah, that'd be cool. That'd be great.
Well, they're not being offered to us in a way we would have preferred.
Oh, that's
No,
meant
you
for
heard the
me.
mayor of DC said, no, we've got to get rid of routes and give them back to the local jurisdictions because electrification is costing us too much money.
That's so short-sighted, because actually one of the issues is interregional transit. Because again, most of us don't just stay in Arlington.
I agree, and there's so much, which is why if I'm going to DC, I invariably, I'm in New York City, girl, I take the metro.
Yeah.
But, I don't know how much control we have over those things being tossed over, and I think Alexandria is going to get some too.
Well, and again, then when we get to the legislative letter, we just need to spend more money on transit and less on highways.
I just want to get through this pretty quickly because
Yeah,
again,
let's
this is
finish it,
kind of a sneak peek of something that's going to come to you in a much more wholesome way later on this fall. So if we could get back to the presentation very quickly, because I know you need to get to your legislative priorities. And geez, that's going to be Mr. Toad's wild ride this year, isn't it? So we've got these, goals, and I wanted to go really quickly through some of the analysis. So, so here you've got the county-owned public charging sites, and this is going to expand. Dominion can actually work with us on a schedule shorter than 2 years to put those in. Next slide, please. This is how we did, this is just a.
Demetra?
Yeah.
Demetra, you're not sharing your screen anymore. Can you please reshare the screen?
Oh, really?
Can you see it now, Jonathan?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Okay, great. So this was really the analysis of looking at, origin destination, where there's a concentration of the existing EVs, but also where there's low access to public charging. High multifamily occupancy, because again, pre-existing buildings is just proving too expensive. High social vulnerability, we're looking at those places, but we're not really planning out those areas on the presumption that socially vulnerable areas will go out and buy electric vehicles en masse, even with the federal tax credits. So we're looking at using them for really kind of economic development and more circulation within those districts. Identify travel destinations, and then looking at potential on and off street locations. Next slide, please. So this is just a sample of priority areas. We chose these 3 census tracts for the initial kind of demonstration of the kind of methodology. Okay. And now you're seeing that there's the census tracts and the top travel destinations within these census tracts. And then there was an exceptionally deep GIS study and on-site ground truthing and sampling, looking at those areas, looking at where you had ideal areas for the installation, and really trying to connect those areas very, very conveniently and very close to these heavy destination spots within each district. And again, you're going to see the initial identification of actual sites. And these are just identifying sites for further and deeper investigation.
Demetra, are any of these along federal aid highways sort of eligible for NEVI money under the infrastructure bill?
The NEVI money, it's really, oh, you get me on my favorite subject of federal grants. NEVI is really basically lumped into 2 different programs. One are just the local connectors, and the others are what they call the kind of more regional connectors. Then we are connected with the state and connected with the regional NBRC and COG in both DFI sections of that. And we're identifying areas. According to the state Department of Environmental Quality, they seem to think that we are for corridor charging, but they said installed out. They think that we're at some saturation point, and we're trying to really take their analysis and look at that and identify where inadvertently there just may be some pockets that they haven't thought of. And I think, was that the last slide? Yeah. That was the last slide. So again, you get just a taste. But I know it seems crazy to spend so much time on the charging infrastructure network, but we really just think that that's going to be not the only silver bullet, but we think it's going to be one of the silver bullets of really helping to accelerate and expand this transition to electric vehicles.
What in terms of looking at incentives for basically private property owners to install for public uses? Presumably there might be some money involved for them in that. I mean, this is not something I think the county should be spending a lot of money on.
I was kind of wondering, the other thing that I'm looking at is when you get into residential neighborhoods, Dominion is supposedly piloting, because in areas where they're Dominion streetlights, they're not individually metered. All of the county-owned streetlights are. So if they're not individually metered, they can't attach a charger to that. But they're testing and piloting, and they told me that the pilot will be done by December, we'll say, this kind of remote technology that doesn't need to be individually metered. So if that works, it can be, I think, in terms of neighborhoods, because I know that everybody was talking about things that Harrisburg and Baltimore and a couple of other, regional and in the mid-Atlantic area have done, where they've allowed people to drag basically a charging, cable across the sidewalk out of their house. But this is universal. You can't reserve in the public right away a parking space to that person. So these programs are failing. They get up and pilot, they fail, understandably, because the people are like, well, if I'm going through all this cost to do that, I need to be able to have the guarantee that my car is going to be able to be right there.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be able to charge it. So we're just looking at hopefully remote technologies and other technologies that I hope are going to evolve quickly. And very quickly, because I want to get you to your legislative priorities letters, Worcester Polytechnic Institute evidently has a well-established program where their super students in their junior class receive a lot of proposals from all over the United States and some from overseas, and they're from governments, they're from corporations, they're from nonprofits. And we pitch projects to them. And it's very, very highly competitive. And there were a number from the COG region, and ours got chosen. And I couldn't help but think of Joan because it's a kind of MIT-ish institution, for those of you not familiar with it,
This is
for engineers.
Worcester, Massachusetts.
And our pitch was to do an analysis that was specific to local conditions and buildings on embodied carbon. So we started, they chose ours. We started the meetings with them last Friday. It's a semester-long project for them. They do the first 6 weeks on campus. And we're having discussions with them, setting up nationally renowned subject matter expert interviews with them. Steve Waltz at the COG has just been absolutely wonderful in connecting us with some really highly regarded experts. And he actually turns out to be an alumni of WPI. And then they will be here on site. The program puts them up at housing in DC and gives them stipend. But they will be working here in this building between October 24th and December 13th.
And what exactly do you mean by embodied? Or what exactly are they going to measure? Is that in existing buildings or new buildings?
We're talking tomorrow to see, because last week, and the students, I have to say, kind of control this a little bit more. We're not in total control. They're not taking absolute direction from us. But they started talking about whether or not they wanted to focus on a study of new construction or retrofitting or repurposing an existing building.
That's not decided.
Sorry?
And they haven't decided yet.
No, we're supposed to have a discussion with them tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be great to have, more of those numbers. I mean, any number I see, it always makes more sense to retrofit. Almost
Ultimately,
always.
yeah.
There may be other issues, but.
I mean, it's not that studies don't exist, but to have one that's
Right.
specific to
Yeah.
building or
Yeah.
building opportunities
Yeah.
here,
Yeah.
whether they look at an actual SPRC and really start kind of pulling that apart for a new construction, or whether they look at under the CMRI, an existing building that may be.
Why don't you have them look at a couple of the buildings that the Plan Langston Boulevard is said that could be torn down and replaced by larger buildings?
I have to look at what AET, I know that AET did a study of buildings. We don't have to,
Yeah.
gear
Yeah,
it
but,
totally towards the CMRI.
Yeah, but again, you've got this plan underway and it does really suggest that a large number, not the small auto, the 1 or 2 level, but we're talking multi-story residential places are, well, yeah, you can tear it down and we'll be happy, replace this market rate affordable housing with something that's luxury apartments and maybe a few.
Well, that almost becomes like a
Affordable housing.
blended project,
Yeah.
doesn't it? Because you're looking at the embodied carbon that's associated with the demolition. And you're looking at
Yeah.
what are the options and the standards for really pulling down the carbon
yeah.
content of any new construction.
So again,
Yeah.
it's something out there, it's on people's minds.
I will
It's
bounce that
relevant.
off the 4 eager minds tomorrow discussion.
Okay, and you were going to talk about the green building incentive policy? Where we stand on that, what to
Yes.
expect?
And I can tell you what I've socialized with the board. Again, this was something that, and you know most of this, but not all of this already. We went to the county manager. The county manager did ask actually county attorney to check something that we were being consistent with state law and we're going sideways. With the green building incentive program, for those of you who are new or didn't hear this before, we were doing a deep analysis of that program. And even though last year we did 5 million square feet, which was extraordinary, over 50% of that was grandfathered into the prior standard. And we started noticing that lately we've had people that have been going for tier 3, but essentially anybody that wasn't grandfathered in was going through the 2 lowest tiers and nobody was touching tiers 3 and 4. we're also getting a lot of feedback from the developers, of course, the SPRC, that the building was kind of making them weary on some level. And there was one project, and this is totally, I mean, I think, was it in C2E2? No, it was in the Energy Committee. Remember the gentleman that you brought in? And he's a consultant to developers. And Rich and I we could feel the blood just kind of draining out of our head at the same time. He said, yeah, he said, like, there was a project of a client of mine, and they were going to build vertical solar on the envelope of the building. And I don't know who it was. I think their designer or something said, don't bother. It's too complicated to go through this process. Just write out a check to affordable housing and let's, kind of move forward. So, so we started saying, okay, where do we want to go? How do we address maybe issues? And where do we fill gaps? So what we came up with was a very kind of, some people might say rogue, but we would like to think it's a bold proposition that really streamlined the lead instead of making it so incremental. It's a streamlined lead, have a very strong standard for lead, a couple of extra measures, and then an alternate climate adaptation model, which is the FIOS model.
When you say streamline lead, do you mean make fewer options, fewer steps for the different?
Have stuff that's really consolidated, kind of pull some options into your baseline and make less
Simple
options.
progress.
Because the options, that list started
Complex.
getting so long, it was ridiculous. And it started making, I think it was part of the tedium that was really affecting the developers. They're like, geez, there's this 50 things and we've got to do all these analyses in each one of them. And then, of course, the ultimate, which was the climate adaptation, because what we're looking at is a really forward-facing, not solely, but actually an extreme heat, facing kind of standard. And establishing that. Now, granted, that is a higher standard than LEED. It's probably going to be more expensive to meet that standard. So we started developing a proposal for financial incentives. And the financial incentives are based on price value, to be quite honest with you, quite bold. As time went on, because we've been working on this for a year now, inside here, with the office market starting to really cave as much as it did, I'm not sure whether financial incentives are, kind of realistic expectation in the near term. We also added on in existing buildings, because we know that we have existing buildings that predate a lot of the code. I'm not saying that the current code it's wanting in a lot of areas and it's behind the international code, but the pre-existing buildings were mainly built to no code at all, or very little. So our pre-existing buildings are trapping a lot of our greenhouse gas emissions, generating a lot of our greenhouse gas emissions in terms of building inventory. So we also developed an existing building. So you may say, well, wait a minute, they can't get bonus density. So again, there was a financial incentive there because they're existing buildings and the value is lower. That might be more doable or conceivable in the near term. And then, of course, there was this training program that we talked about. I was really interested to, talk to Ted and Ma about that, where we hope that through awareness, through familiarity, little by little by little, you're going to start to see that kind of climate adaptation model creeping into design. We had the meeting, we presented to the county manager. He did ask us a number of questions and we have the information. So we're ready to go back to him within the next couple of weeks. And then we're going to go to the board. So again, that's something that before the end of the year, I know this is late, but to be frank, and maybe we shouldn't have exercised so much independence. We thought if we just up the ante, we could be making the program could be creeping towards self-obsolescence. And we're also really focusing on extreme heat as a future. I mean, that's going to be, in addition to inland flooding, that's going to be our second largest climate vulnerability with significant impacts. And FIOS, for those of you that are familiar with it, has a much stronger presence of biophilic infrastructure. And I loved those vertical gardens in Freiburg.
Yes.
I don't know
That
if
was
you
a great
noticed that
article.
Great Star building that's coming up right here. They kind of played with that around the
And what they're
restaurant.
doing in Singapore.
Singapore's fabulous.
Yeah.
But Singapore, they're all over the place. And I saw a lot of that actually in Sydney, where they were just taking every opportunity to do green walls, green, facades.
But they're also making space for green space, which,
Well, downtown Sydney is pretty impervious, I have to say, the kind of newer section of it. But in that heat wave where they had the millennial drought, I mean, they just started realizing that they had to really start control their ambient environment.
But Demetra, with a new focus on climate adaptation, we're not going to take the emphasis off mitigation aspect of it, are we? And pushing towards electrification.
Mitigation, adaptation, resilience, equal, three-pronged stool.
So I should just report to this committee that the Energy Committee's July meeting, a major chunk of that meeting was focused on brainstorming with Demetra to the extent that she was able at that time to share with us different ideas that might go into a proposal for a new or revised, updated green building incentive policy program. And we did bring in Tad Lunger, who is very well tied in with the Arlington County developer community and has represented many of them on many projects over the last 20 years. And I haven't debriefed Demetra since that meeting on it, so I can share my impressions. It would be wonderful if Arlington County could somehow incentivize existing building owners to electrify or to decarbonize, to get rid of their methane powered systems and replace them with electric. And, but unfortunately, in the state legislative environment we have here with the Dillon rule and the current state laws in place, the only real incentive carrot that might be used would be tax rebates or tax reductions in property taxes. And Demetra, to her credit, I believe, has been looking very closely and trying to find a way to make that work. But in talking with Tad Lunger, it was my impression, I'm just speaking for myself, it's really tough to do. It's really tough to effectively incentivize existing building owners to electrify. And it would be great if we could find some way to do it. In other jurisdictions, they can just have a regulation or have an ordinance or have a state law. But we can't really do that here in Arlington. So I don't know. And plus, of course, if Demetra and the air team or whoever go to the decision makers in the county and say, we want to give up some county tax revenue for this great thing to help humanity. That's a really, really hard sell. And there's only so many bullets in the gun, so to speak.
well, to what extent does renovation and retrofitting actually raise the property value? I mean, if you're getting that, then they should be, even if you're giving tax incentives.
I think, and if I could, I'm guessing where your discussion went with this is that they're not looking to avoid extra taxes, the developers and building owners. They're looking to neutralize or minimize the cost of the investment. So they're looking for incentives that kind of offset the investment.
And, but the IRA incentives should do a lot for that.
Those incentives,
They're focused on low
yeah,
income.
but it's, if you're talking about an existing building, you're really talking about changing the systems of the building and not just buying the
And
equipment.
it's more complicated in the.
So, yeah, it's far more complicated than that. And sometimes the retrofit to make it, kind of transition friendly is the more expensive aspect of it. What we're trying to do, and I'm hoping. The good news is, I know that the administration is trying to pull us out of Red Shape at the end of the year, and there has been a lawsuit that's been filed. So we're looking, I think the next pleading for the plaintiffs, the
think the
filing
county
date for
board
that
actually-
is October 4th.
I think the county board actually just voted to go with an amicus brief on one of the lawsuits related to Reggie. I was there on Tuesday, I actually heard it.
She's
so.
perfect.
Hopping back a little bit, it may, I don't know if it would be helpful to even just communicate with eligible households about the availability of some of the individual incentives in the IRA. I know when you approach it from a neighborhood or census tract perspective, it can sometimes be a little more cost effective. And folks that are in the low income areas, you have to meet them more than halfway to get any kind of.
I have to be honest with you, it's not that it's a bad idea, it's just not a very productive idea, because the big kind of hurdle is really the retrofit the household or the, small family, the garden apartment, whatever it may be. We have had, and we do, and what we have to do is probably a more targeted and, kind of louder campaign to draw people to our website, because we keep on getting asked, even by people within the county, our peers, they're like, why don't you guys tell people about the incentives? And it's like, here's the URL. It's been up there for months. We update it, routinely. But it's also, we're looking at having it all money, and we're having to look to our budget. But we're trying to, with the Green Building Choice and other programs, really do audio visual. We're trying to really gear, instead of having a kind of webinar or having an event, that if people, 10 people or 20 people come to the event, you're not making scale, is to really start talking to people and have films with whole home, contractors and auditors that go in and you follow them, you film that. Having people, hi, this is what you get by electrifying and switching up this equipment, and this is what you have to look for and do, and blah, blah, blah. And it's interesting because they're doing it. I'm still, after all these years, still getting, I'm on the listservs for people, groups with the CCAs in the Bay Area. And it was interesting because this past week, I forwarded it on to Rich, because he's developing energy futures proposal for the federal grants and for electrification equipment. And I said, I thought this would be interesting. And it was people there going, well, I don't know. And they said it was going to cost $8,100. And what do I do with this? So really the retrofit, we have to really start educating people, because I think what happens if they go to do it and then they find that there are these other things they have to do, they lose their taste for it. I think if we let them know in advance and really make them comfortable with the process, it's better. So I'm hoping that by doing that, and then by constantly bringing up at every event, every county event, I go on and see these, webinars about electrifying your home and doing this and doing that. And that's a crossover where we do want to incorporate, particularly with public choice and public education and persuasion. We do want to bring in kind of no regrets measures from consumption-based inventory plans. Because I think when personal choice is involved, they can be really effective.
So you say you're going to go to the board by the end of the year. Where's the opportunity for public engagement?
No, that internal briefing of the board. And then after that, then we go to the public engagement. What generally happens is, the rule of thumb is we can't go to the public with detailed information that the board itself doesn't have. So what you do is you go into these 2x2s. They're not for decision making. They're for exchanging information, Q&A with the board. They become familiar with this subject. And then after that, then we go into the public engagement, the commission engagement, and then ultimately you go back to the board, and the board receives all this input.
It's going to put us quite behind that process of what was originally planned. 2023 was when the the update was supposed to happen.
Yeah,
And we know
you
many
know,
reasons.
we could have done that, but I think that the program would basically start kind of collapsing.
No, we agree. This is interesting, it's different. But yeah, so
Yeah.
public engagement and commission engagement is after the 2 budgets.
Also just noting, we might want to revisit the agenda.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, well, I think some of the other things we can get through a little quicker than we have scheduled for it. And I think this is an important thing. And I guess, you know, we've been spending a lot of time at the SPRCs.
Yep.
And, you know, we still see a lot of pushback on electrification. And that was a key issue that we fought pretty hard for when they adopted, updated GBI. And I think as we've gone through these, and especially as new commissioners, people like Mark have come in and said, you know, really, we need to be looking at a lot of other things, particularly related to stormwater, urban heat islands. So, I mean, from our perspective of, you know, what do we want, you know, kind of what's the baseline do we want for new buildings to have and the expectations, and, you know, and kind of can align pretty much with some of our starting points, but then, you know, more broadly, you know, kind of, and there's a whole embodied coverage. So, you know, kind of is kind of our points of looking at something, understanding, you know, and maybe, again, more streamlined. Again, I'm less and less enthused by LEED, although I know they have some other certification aspects of it that they don't, they're really not geared towards decarbonization. They're maybe other programs, they're out there for that are better substitutes. Because it's a little bit of everything, and since they can pick and choose, they're not necessarily, sent around that article is they're not even building buildings that can withstand what we're seeing with the climate intense, you know, the intense storms and that, at least down in Florida. So again, you know, so I think from our perspective, so, you know, kind of want to make sure that we have plenty of time to book in and make sure that we can kind of, you know, push for something. But and again, understanding we're in Virginia, we got to make it appealing. We also know we have Montgomery County and DC. That, you know, I think DC it will be full electrification for all buildings by
the way,
2026.
they're very happy. Mary Beth from DC is very happy to come to you. It's just that green build was this week.
Okay. So if
they're
they can come
green
next
belt.
week,
Oh,
if
yeah.
they can come next time.
And I'll just put a pin in this. It's one of my favorite things, and I'm just throwing it out there. I think in the future, Joe, maybe forget the insurance aspect. Because insurability of buildings.
Going to be a big thing.
Yeah.
going forward.
Yeah, huge issue.
Standard and Poor's and Moody's are already looking at local governments. They're like, no, we don't want to see your climate action plans. We want to see your climate action plans and your CIP for the implementation of it.
Well, thank you. That's what we've been saying.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, anybody
Okay.
got any other comments? Pardon?
I'm dying to hear what you guys do with the legislative platform.
Okay.
So much to do, so little,
Yeah,
so little certainty.
Yeah, well, they kind of bring this up, if you make it a little larger, so that's what poor eyesight can see it a little better. Yeah, it's great. I think this time, last year we just did, we've got to defend. This year, I think we don't know. We won't know until after the elections. In either case, we're still going to have a governor that is pushing back against, you know, the gains that were made a couple of years ago. But I think, you know, if both the houses shift, there's a potential there to actually at least pass legislation and make it vetoed. But that starts to kind of change the dynamics and it gives an opportunity for the legislature to really discuss and work on some of these issues. And then, you know, change in governor or change, you know, the political situation change in Richmond, you can see what we saw in 2020. And it just bing, 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 they just pushed through so much legislation. So anyway, that's kind of the way it was kind of framed. So a little more than last year, but with enough kind of If we want to go through, I think somebody had mentioned adding maybe a little bit more specific to Arlington.
Right.
That, and I think there's some examples there, just, I've seen some intense rain events and record heat, even as recently as this September. We can put that in the first paragraph. Does that kind of fit with what?
Because I somehow missed this letter, you just put it in the middle, so I want to be able to read it.
You sent an email.
I did, and I feel very strongly about it now. Let's start with the very top. What's the first thing? Okay, as a top priority, Reggie, let's scroll through the whole thing. And I guess I want to ask ourselves, what is actually going to make the most difference if it happens to Arlington? And I feel super strongly about asking for permission from the state to use the latest building code here in Arlington. I wonder what skin it would be off Richmond's back to allow Arlington to do that. I realize that Arlington may run a risk that developers won't come here anymore, but because they'd rather work where there's a weaker building code.
Where's the activity? Where's the business going to be?
Yes, it's going to be here.
Arlington is.
Our
attractive,
location
so
is
They will
fantastic.
yell and scream, but does that make a
Still going.
difference?
And they're still building in Montgomery and DC. So is Reggie more important? I mean, it's grant money, but fundamentally, is it more important to have a updated building code if we could possibly get it? I mean, they're both important.
Yeah, and some, I think maybe, if we add in an extra sentence, we could start another paragraph and just title that or kind of protecting past gains or something like that.
I had suggested a
Yeah.
category for these
Yeah,
top
right,
two
yeah.
or top three that says these are maybe
Yeah,
overarching
and it
goals.
just kind of started with this is the defense part of the, and if we're going to get to renewable energy grid, it's got to be at the state level.
Can I
That's, I
scroll
think,
through
the
it so we can see the
important-
whole thing?
The main importance of Reggie, I think that the funding was, to date, Virginia's taken in $730 million out of Reggie in just a couple of years. But separate apart from that, it's a typical, carbon market where the whole point of it is not to be eternal. It's to have these emitters, these big emitters, reduce and clean up their grid.
Right.
And with, Dominion being pretty open about their quote unquote inability to meet the renewable portfolio standards anytime soon. If you don't have Reggie, I think you have no swim lanes and no guardrails anymore.
It's also a cost of lab for, all the environmental groups, lots of political push for it. I think it's a good thing for us to join in on that, recognizing we don't have to carry the water on it because there's so many people who are actually fighting it.
This is at the county.
That's true.
And we
The
could
county's
certainly
already on board on
Right.
this.
have sort of co-equal top priorities of both an offense and a defense. On offense, it sounds like Dillon rule and being able to set our own standards is a major priority for Arlington County, less likely that it's going to happen, but the defensive priority of making sure that we stay in Reggie, which to lead would be headlines and, sort of a culture proxy war that would take us in such the wrong direction and be so out of step with where I think the state of Virginia actually is, certainly Arlington County. But I think we can have both those priorities in the first bullets. And
Are we looking for an exception to the Dillon rule or not?
Get
rid
of
that.
It's not an exception, it's asking for authorization, and if you get the authorization, you're in compliance with the Dillon rule, I suppose, right?
But are we asking just for Arlington County or
Yes.
for every single county? See, if you give it to Arlington County, then every other county in Virginia is gonna
Well,
want it
that's-
too, right?
there's to
So
ask.
as a legislator, it's like,
Well, again,
okay, fine, let
the
every
legis-
county
yeah.
make their own building rules. I mean,
Well,
that's
the
a huge
legislation is that, counties can do this. if
Each
they want
individual
to.
county can do it.
And it like the plastic bag tax, it passes that authority down.
Demetra, what would it take for the county to actually ask? What would that look like?
Well, the interesting thing is that our code administrator is not technically, I've heard of this before, they're not technically an employee of the county. All of the state's building code administrators, Shariar, they're technically employees of the state.
Oh.
They don't report to anybody, they don't report up to anybody in the county.
Is that because of the Dillon rules?
Yeah, it's because it's like,
Or
well, if the
one-
building code is just the state
Or
code.
one
then why-
geographic area for
Well,
building code purpose?
Who benefits from that? Not residents.
No.
The developers.
So why negotiate against ourselves and ask for, a half measure? These are our priorities as the commission, right? So why not start strong? And of course, we're not gonna achieve that goal, but,
And
it's certainly we could push.
It might help the argument, it's not like Virginia is the only Dillon rule state. 38 out of the 50 states are Dillon rule states.
Very antiquated.
It's just that the other states have, capitals that go for it.
And the
They have
president
it,
has asked the states, President Biden has asked the states to adopt legislation. And, I just read that a couple days ago, and there's going to be a push, or there is a push, and to be in compliance, get with it.
And we're passing on available incentives to do so as well. We're leaving funding on the table at the federal level by not being able to pursue
And
that.
I think that actually maybe is tonight they were supposed to be releasing, the White House was supposed to be releasing some net zero building standards. So that, again, that's another thing that we could point to. for
And then the building,
GBI.
and then the government's gonna shut down tomorrow, so nobody will know about it.
We live in a crazy world.
Okay, so is there discussion about switching the order again?
I would.
Starting the
I would
order
follow
is just in
sort of.
defense, kind of, or the order of the bullets down below, or highlighting.
Anybody else have feelings about it?
We're completely hamstrung by the Dillon rule.
Yeah.
Reading's gotta be tough. Based on both impacting and the ability to make.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I would put it right up there. And as Elizabeth said, we can have a category of top priorities for overarching. priorities. Let's not call it defensive.
Yeah. Structural
This first
priorities
bullet,
are-
local authority to establish, I mean, is that essentially asking for the same thing?
Yes.
Yes. But but the way you're talking about it gets right to the heart of it.
Yeah.
What keeps us from doing that.
Stretch codes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Short name.
I think the top one is stretch codes, right? And then the other one is just, we're so antiquated in terms of just even adopting the latest of the national building codes.
Yeah.
And then the benchmarking, again, that just gives more authority. And I know Rip Sullivan from time to time puts in a benchmarking bill.
On-bill financing is more for energy efficiency, right?
Yeah.
What is that headline again? Is it net zero or what? What is the headline?
Building.
Net zero carbon buildings.
yeah.
That doesn't actually fit under here.
Well, the thing is, it's buildings. It's all
Yeah.
about buildings.
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
That
the
stuff
thing
is
is
about
that especially this deals with the fact that for, especially multifamily residential buildings, it's the renters that pay the utility bills, but it's the owners that actually pay to do the upgrades, so there's not much incentive for them to
Incentive,
update.
yeah.
So the idea is if you can do the on-bill, or is that way at least, the financing would be done and that it would be the utility payers that would, pay that back essentially in terms of the saving, so they're not paying more, but some of what they're paying is paying back the updates.
Just popped in, I saw the light and I said, I wanted to show you something I borrowed from the chair.
Oh, yeah.
We were joking, said now you know what platinum, what's the next titanium? I said, no, we have a new element in the periodic system, it will be Arlington. Lead element. So, but these are only 3 laurels here, you cannot really rest on them.
Of course not.
But at least you know that you're not in the wrong way, so. It's just-
It's really
just
interesting
another
their
show.
legislative
A lot of
priority
people have
level.
worked very, very hard for that.
Yeah.
So that means that there is reward for working hard and getting places and trying to go against the flow sometimes, as you know, only dead fish go with the flow.
Thank you.
Thank you. If you get all your legislative asks, we'll have to have a titanium level.
Right. Diamond level.
Yep, Jonathan.
Yeah, this might be heretical, but given the $27 billion that is about to be released in the next 6 months to actually execute green banks all across the country, and the fact that at the state level, the state Department of Energy is very actively preparing their applications and all that. If we are looking to prioritize, maybe we can strike the green bank support, not because it's not important, but because it's kind of one of the things that there is, without a shadow of a doubt, going to be progress on green banks this coming year because of federal action and the fact that the governor is not blocking action by his Department of Energy on the money flowing through. So just in terms of
Do we
prioritization.
need anything further from the legislature on green
He
banks?
Jonathan brings up a good
Can't
point.
hurt,
We are
but-
tracking both the state and we also are part of the Coalition for Green Capital application. And if they get that, we've already set up the regional mechanism.
Fewer
Arlington,
asks are better
Yeah.
too.
um,
Fewer asks are better.
I think fewer asks, and I think that this one is pretty well,
Yeah.
it's true.
think-
Jonathan's right. It's pretty well situated.
I think it's a good
we're-
point.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let me ask a highly cynical question. What happens if Trump wakes up tomorrow and X's or tweets, whatever they call it, the green banks are like another communist spot? Do you immediately get like a reaction of, okay, all of a
Windmills
sudden
are
we're
killing whales. That's the latest.
Is it?
Yeah.
I kill him, just drive him crazy.
I mean, I just want, I just worry about the complete irrationality of a lot of the official response to anything green.
Uh-huh.
Will our
Yeah.
letter make a difference?
I mean, I think it's the point of, do we need something from Richmond to go forward with the Green Bank? And I think there was some question at some point that if we wanted to do a regional Green Bank, there wasn't 100% sure that it was, the law was structured that would allow that. But I think if the comfort level with the lawyers is that it's just a matter, we have to get the money, we can go forward and set up a Green Bank, then I'm fine with dropping that.
And the state is really covered because, they're getting their administration costs out of it too, so.
Okay, well, I hope so.
You're right. Less,
Yeah.
less
To
tasks,
to Kevin's point, though, I mean, we could perhaps have a catch-all to prevent any kind of backsliding. You never know what the next cause celeb may be from, any kind of political figure to walk backwards on some of the progress we've made. And I think it would be a priority to defend against that kind of backsliding on Reggie, on green banks, on any kind of effort that's already being made. So maintenance of effort could be sort of a catch-all category, and maybe some more of these could be
Well, maybe the
deleted
lead
or
into the
included into that.
strategy is that, kind of general, any effort to
Mhm.
undercut, and these are particular
Yeah.
focus areas right now,
Right.
are these 3 bullets. But,
Right.
it kind of, again, our politicians and, the staff are pretty much attuned to how things are changing. So, just, kind of getting this in when, our our legislators liaison working, she'll know, kind of get the county board guidance on what things to focus on.
Yeah,
I think
she's
she's
great.
agile enough to know if something comes up that everybody needs to weigh in on to prevent, that they'll do that. So, but I can kind of tweak that language a little bit. So, anything else in that paragraph? Are we okay with the on-bill finance paying? We were gonna strike the green bank. Okay, so the next paragraph, again, getting renewable energy. Again, are these all issues that are still pending? And we don't have any competition in markets. We have to go through Dominion, which, solar ready schools, the solar ready schools actually is a good thing to keep on just because that's a Barbara law. So it'll make her happy. I think our schools are mostly going to are being built to be solar ready as they replace roofs. So not particularly pertinent to us, but community choice aggregation. Demetri, do you get any sense that we need more from the legislation on that? I think that's going to be the case.
My personal opinion is that it needs to be, there's some big gaps there that need to be closed. Yeah.
Maybe we should move that and make that first. I mean, to me, I think.
Or make it second, because the retail choice is really
Okay.
important too.
We'll flip order for CCA.
And by the way, we're probably moving forward next week with finalizing a contract. We'll in October get that executed in a firm that's doing the analysis, and we still expect it before the end of the year. And it includes retail choice as well.
Yeah. Just CCA is just such a wonderful way of taking care of so many things at once.
You should talk to, is it Randy Freed? He's the head of the Environmental Commission for Prince William County. He was at the COG-SIPC meeting this week, and he was raving about community choice aggregation. It was really surprising. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so then transportation, school buses. Was that legislation? Somebody suggested something more specific.
You can't see where I commented.
Yeah, thought that was on the legislation. Whether it was a legislation or funding issue.
Needed. What kind of legislation?
I mean, are there anything that
Particularly
particularly
the
needed to be
legislation, the
funded?
budget is just funding the legislation. Yeah.
So we'll substitute funding for legislation.
Funding is needed to speed.
Robust funding.
Favorite words. Are you, oh, you're taking notes.
Is that last sentence right? That Grant for fossil gas buses as for diesel buses, will you end diesel buses instead of add?
Program to change.
I think as is correct.
I think as is correct, but what, I'm not sure, I'm not sure reviewed is the correct word there. Do we want to review? Do we want it revised? What do we want?
Grant program.
What about developed? Don't you want them developed?
Well, right now, the problem is that you incentivize diesel, replacement of diesels. You don't incentivize replacement of other fossil fuels.
Yeah, you just have to read that sentence 3 times.
Yeah.
It is in the passive voice. So you could say review grant programs to ensure the same consideration for replacement of fossil gas buses when supporting the transition to electric.
Starting out with review. Kind of a command form.
So as soon as you educate me on the specific legislative action that we want.
What sounds like a technical correction legislation.
Just when I read that was reviewed where it is, it sounds like they already exist and you're reviewing them.
Yeah.
Is that the case?
I mean, there's across the board, I mean, I know the problem in school buses, but there's across the board incentivization to get rid of diesel, which creates problems when you've got other fossil fuels you're trying to replace.
What about establish? Because you're really asking them to establish the grant programs, right?
Maybe a step.
That's kind of the ask.
Or expand?
Well, there are, I mean, the state is giving a lot of grants for transit buses.
Right, but for,
Yeah.
do they have grant programs where
I
that's
don't know, yeah.
an eligible use of money?
Shouldn't the sentence start out, because the same consideration should be given for fossil gas buses as for diesel buses in grant programs?
Same.
I like making a
Consideration.
statement like that, so.
I don't know who's editing that.
So asking to expand or modify an existing program, right? So provide more grant money and expand eligibility of that, this grant.
It should be given.
So expand or modify grant programs to ensure that
The
the
same
same consideration is given for fossil gases
Yeah,
or
yeah.
diesel.
That works.
All right, okay, and local funding.
More wordsmithing.
Yeah,
we can work.
Yeah. Oh, well, it's afraid it just is our expansion or expansion or, actually, most of it was cut and pasted from previous years.
Many cooks in the
Yeah,
kitchen
yeah.
over the years.
Yeah, our priorities haven't changed all that much, other than that we just didn't really focus on it the last year or so, because there wasn't any point.
Right.
And then the increased funding, I mean, I actually think this is really important. I don't know whether it should be a first bullet. I mean, right now, we spend about 75% of transportation funds on highways. Is, that should be at least parity. Anybody object to making that the first?
Favor zero money on new roads.
Yeah.
First altogether.
First bullet of that section of transportation.
Yeah.
Well, repairing is fine. Fixing bridges,
Yeah, use federal dollars for
but need more lanes
roads and
anywhere.
highways.
Of course, even that should be more focused on transportation, but rail and that, but. Okay, the other environmental issues? Good. All right, any other comments, changes, anything missing? A motion to approve with all the changes that we've discussed. Does anybody want me to run through the changes?
No, but can you recirculate the letter when it's fully fixed? Can actually approve something.
Well, we have to approve
The
here,
problem is we have to approve now.
but we could look at it again for any tiny tweaks, I suppose.
Yeah.
We could approve it subject to,
In some
Subs,
subject to recirculation. Final approval by the chair.
Yeah,
But we have to,
Yeah.
but we have to.
Yeah,
So I
we
will
do that.
I will approval subject to recirculation committee for any final changes, but the chair's final discretion to send out at the appropriate time.
And we've got a fairly tight deadline at this point, so
Yeah,
I will
so-
send it out tomorrow,
Right.
and then I will, kind of get it to the county
And-
board.
And we will not snow you under the bus. changes.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, now the sunrise letter. This is actually one of the only times, I think once before we came out a number of years ago. And probably certainly since we've started using our checklist, this is the first time. I feel comfortable just saying out now, we don't think this should be approved.
Joan and I met with the developers afterwards. I offered that we would meet with them and to talk about some of the things they could do. They took the meeting, I think, as a courtesy, but nothing really has changed.
Who is the primary? Who's been going to the SPRC?
Well, the first SPRC was held at one of our commission meetings.
Yeah.
So, I mean, again, we were doing the usual email exchange, and then it turned out that something else came up and I was out of town. So Carrie went to the second one, where they talked about the environmental issues. Make very clear, you know, what some of the issues are. But again, you know, we were, again, you know.
They won't be blindsided.
It was the only time the chair, the SPRC chair associated himself with my comments. That's never happened.
Who was the chair?
I had it written down somewhere.
Daniel?
Leo.
Yeah, Leo's pretty strong.
What is this building being purposed for?
It's a senior living, sunrise
Assisted
senior living.
Is the chair?
Yeah.
Yeah, and they're not participating in green building incentive policy.
They're leaning on the crutch that, you know, if the power goes out, the seniors will suffer, you know,
Because
because
they don't have gas.
if they don't have gas backup.
Yeah, but at the same time, their energy efficiency is 60% over ASHRAE. And even the site plan conditions call for 20%, even if you're not participating in the green building incentive policy.
Building looks really nice.
Interesting.
Is the chart?
So, you know, the format's a little bit different than our usual, just because kind of lay out all of the issues. And I wanted to also get into their arguments that because this is seniors and they've got these, you know, requirements to run continuously and under emergency circumstances, all of which I get and say, but you know, it doesn't necessarily apply that they have to have gas.
Right. I mean, that's a stupid argument. That, well, of course they, no, I mean, like, it's just a stupid argument. Yes, of course there has to be backup power. And that's literally exactly what battery storage is. It's backup power. I mean, and it can run for 3 days without refill, depending on the size of the battery pack, right? Like, I mean, it's just a stupid argument.
Careful thinking.
Well, and the other thing is if you have a highly efficient building with a good envelope, it's going to keep the heat or keep the heat out or keep the cool in and keep the heat in.
And keep them healthier too.
Yeah.
Which is something they apparently don't care about because they're
Right.
burning gas.
Yeah.
We also know that gas does not perform very well in extreme cold weather events,
Right.
and it's very difficult to get natural gas. We don't have firm, uninterruptible supply contracts, which usually you don't for electricity, especially backup electricity.
Although I, you know, I can't remember at least that cat's actually being cut off anywhere here.
We're in a middling climate.
Yeah. So.
Did people actually get the chance to read? No, it's
Yeah.
kind of a long letter.
I read it.
Yeah.
Can I just
Yes.
jump in? And I was a professional wordsmith for 32 years and we very much, what Alyssa said earlier about the evil of the passive voice. And in the very first sentence, the lead, want to say, we recommend the project not be approved rather than the passive voice. We do not do this. Instead say, we recommend it not be approved.
Okay.
Or be rejected, if you really want to.
Perhaps amended.
Yeah.
I mean, do they have a shot at revising their plan to consider environmental impacts? It's clear that they feel it's not a priority for the residents of the facility, but it is a priority for them.
And I think they're playing on the issue of, well, we need more elder housing. Sure. Of course, I don't believe they're offering any affordable housing. in this project. They're just gonna pay into the housing fund like everybody else does, so they're not really offering affordable housing, so. Okay, so make that active voice. Recommends the application for this and does not recommend this project for approval. Is correct.
Recommends this project not be
Project
approved.
B.
And
Okay.
Rejected those.
And recommends that this project.
Not be approved.
That's currently-
Yeah. It's not actually passive voice, but it's kind of an indirect way of saying what we're trying to say.
Okay.
It's light,
Yeah,
Right.
try to soften it a little bit.
right? Soften the blow.
That this project not be approved. Bold.
I already underlined it, minimum.
Also, comes Washington. We don't recommend, we don't take any position.
Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. That's been, we can serve.
39% is the lowest we've ever seen.
That won't matter, I think.
Pardon?
People will be, to say it's
Yeah.
the lowest we've ever
That's,
seen.
that's been our sting a little bit.
Yes.
Yeah.
They were nice people, though, I have to say. It should hurt even more.
Well, I mean, they had a slide on sustainability and they acted like they were offering a whole lot of good things.
They had a slide,
Yeah.
not any measures of sustainability.
A lot of work.
So again, lead silver,
Sorry.
low energy efficiency. No fossil gas for almost everything.
What does VRF stand for?
Variable or refrigerant.
Flow. So that is a fairly efficient electric system, but you know.
To the point that the county board may not know what VRF is, maybe if you don't spell it out, at least put in parentheses like efficient, fairly efficient.
I mean, there really are a lot more opportunities for more trees.
Yeah, and the
Yeah.
idea that that would be good for the seniors, I'm sure we would find research on
Yeah, I mean, nice little planted areas with good trees. And they're, you know, again, they have,
You guys, I mean, that point is made.
and they make very clear that they weren't doing anything for stormwater.
When we have these modernized building codes, that won't be an option.
Exists.
So there's been a tree canopy on the parking.
Maybe there's a few trees or that, but I don't think. Again, I would think, to me, the thing that makes the most sense is a 2-level parking garage. And then you cut the amount of space that you have for parking and that should open up.
They're keeping the building footprint.
Again, it's more expensive, but, you know, and put solar, you know.
They're keeping the footprint of the building itself pretty small because they've said that they've learned that only 100 residents is what's manageable. And so therefore, it's a rare project where they're not taking up the whole green space. So that was a positive thing.
Yeah, but I mean, the lot right now is in church with the big parking lot.
Yeah.
So it's fairly impervious, but I mean, it may be a bit of improvement, but I think it could be better improvement. Just because it's less than what's there now doesn't mean that that's optimal. And when they're not really trying to do anything for stormwater. How many floors is it? 4 maybe?
Yeah, it's number.
So that's part of why they think they don't have to.
But they do have to get the zone changed. So it has to go before the board.
Yeah, I thought the research was,
Yeah.
good.
But I, you know, because I know they were gonna come back to say, you know, we have to do it this way because that, you know, we need to be able to maintain
Do we-
continue to operate in an emergency.
In the last, do you make the point that Johnson made that backup doesn't have to be gas?
Yeah, okay, we can add that. Where should,
Right when you talk about how important it is to ensure continued operations, however, somewhere. You have to figure out how to fit it in.
Battery.
Yeah.
We need. Are most resilient.
actually, if they had solar panels over the parking area, that would, certainly help a lot more. Especially for ongoing operations, they can at least power it, being a combination of backup and continued use of solar, especially during the day.
Are they cutting down trees? Or are they replacing an existing?
Good question. I don't think they're cutting down a lot of trees.
No, again, there's
no.
not a whole lot on that lot to
Yeah.
begin with.
Yeah. And we had that problem when we looked at Crystal City buildings, that they were all, Crystal City was like a tree desert, I know, but that doesn't mean that we can't have the next iteration be better.
Yeah.
Maybe more natives than just ornamentals.
And I think there was also, Elizabeth, a kind of a suggestion about being more specific in terms of what they want, what they should have.
Oh,
Do we kind of need that?
It's already a long letter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it might be overkill, but I always do believe in being clear, but I was clear to them what they needed to do.
Yeah.
At least verbally, but maybe this letter doesn't do it.
Well, maybe it's something at the minimum, participate in the green building policy, but ideally to commit to a fully electric building,
Are there comments in
high
the
energy,
chart?
higher energy efficiency.
Yeah,
and better
If
fire,
there are,
biofuel
if there are
equipment.
comments in the chart, which we don't have, then
yeah.
it might lay out.
Did the-
I did.
I'm also happy to, withdraw that comment, allow the letter to move forward, but maybe as a policy of the commission, we could try and
Summarize.
give people a path to success, even if we don't like at all what they're currently proposing.
Well,
I think it's important if we don't approve the project, right? Particularly.
what is, I mean, basically, we actually don't say we don't recommend, they don't approve if they're at least participating in the green building incentive policy. So maybe it's just to say that, require the applicant at a minimum to participate at the baseline level of the GBI, but preferably commit to a much more resilient, all highly energy efficient, all electric building.
They're not gonna.
Do be a lot of backtracking in time.
Yeah.
Well, are we desperate for this facility in the county?
Well, I mean, it's not
That's
providing
outside our-
affordable elder care. I mean, they'll say we need it.
It's only 100 beds.
It's not that many.
Right.
It's not, there's nothing affordable. There's nothing affordable. about
Why
it. So,
negotiate on a
Really
climate priority?
yeah. So does that, I mean, does that kind of fix it a little bit? It's just to say, because again, we kind of say, yeah, okay, this is meeting minimal sustainability requirements if you're participating.
I'm afraid
in
we'll give them an idea that they should lowball it.
Yeah,
If we say that.
okay. To, require the applicant to offer a project that would be more consistent, that would be more resilient.
Are we
In a
going to
warming
attach
climate.
the,
Yeah, we are.
So-
I thought it, actually, I thought it did transfer.
Or even say,
Yeah, there it is.
There,
Yeah.
yeah.
repropose facility.
Energy in the red.
did you do this or did
I did that, yeah.
It seems to me that once they get the chart, you
Yeah.
pretty clear what you
Yeah.
need to do to fix that.
Yeah.
You got the
Yeah.
lowest score that's ever been here.
Yeah.
Here's how you raise your score is by addressing these blocks in the
Right,
chart.
yeah.
And I think it would be insulting to say it that
And
simply,
we
but there
tell you,
it is.
We have what the minimum
Right,
version. Yeah.
right.
Maybe encourage them to review the attached spreadsheet of
Or specifics,
improvements that would.
or specific
Yeah, okay.
improvements. that
Or
could-
pass
Forward
improvements
to
in,
approval.
in keeping with using the attached chart as the guideline or keeping.
Okay, so maybe just do, improvement commitment as they require the applicant to address
Yeah.
many of the shortfalls identified in
In
the
the,
checklist below.
yeah.
I just go back to the first sentence in that last paragraph. So, I'm new to this whole commission thing and the role of the commissions, and I know there's a lot of commissions. But we're the Climate Change and Energy Commission, we're not the Senior Living Commission. So
Yeah.
if they want input from the Senior Living Commission, fine, they can get it. And if the Senior Living Commission wants to say, we are desperate for senior housing in Arlington County, fine, and then the board weighs the competing values. But I think if we're saying something about the need for senior living, that's outside our lane. And so I would recommend that we don't need that whole first
Even
phrase. about-
acknowledges the need to expand availability, like, sure, but
Well, we don't even
That's
know if
right.
they
We
do
don't-
need to
we don't-
expand availability. That's not our bailiwick. We are not experts on that. We have not been asked to opine on those issues. And so I think we just stay in our lane, which is the energy, climate change and environment lane, and stay out of senior living.
The one thing that they were trying to do, however, was saying, as we discussed already, that, we must have gas backup because the seniors have particularly unique needs, et cetera, and trying to make a point that, well, not only is it not necessary, what we've said, but, to pitch the needs of, I hate to say it, but residents who won't be living much longer against future generation will. That to me isn't a fair trade-off.
But the balancing is for the board. to-
Correct.
the
You're
board
right, you're right.
Takes
Yeah, but is
competing
this
views of
senior
different
living?
advocates for different
Yes.
positions.
Or is it an assisted living?
It's assisted living,
That's
sorry.
assisted.
Assisted living?
Yes.
Yeah.
well, I think that sentence functions perfectly fine without that first sentence.
Yeah,
Right.
just delete the whole
Paragraph or the sentence?
first sentence.
Hence, the first sentence of the last
With
paragraph.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I guess one of the idea was is that it seems so often in these negotiations that they put, these are all trade-offs and, basically this is just not, it's not a good trade-off. Maybe that the point's made above because we say, well, this is good for seniors living in these facilities.
I think.
But
the point is good
everybody
with the
who wants an
concession
exception,
is unnecessary.
anybody who doesn't want to go down this path makes exactly the same point, well, the thing that we're talking, my business, my building, my residence, my whatever it is much more important than this other thing
Yeah,
got there.
yeah.
So, yeah, you're right. It's a political decision, but I don't think it's incumbent on us or useful for us to support the other side of that argument or to.
Yeah, no.
It's not,
Okay,
you're
yeah.
exactly right. It's not our
Yeah.
expertise to comment on
Yeah.
the value of senior living or this particular project
Right, but
itself.
Well, I just
I
get
like
frustrated because we always seem like we're being put off against each other. And this is probably something that we might want to address more in terms of increasing and engaging interactions with the other commissions across the counties so that, climate is actually incorporated and seen as a benefit for all. And kind of, if we're all in agreement that this stops becoming an issue of trade-offs.
So you might end up with I don't quite have the wording in mind, but you might end up following up with an idea by saying that the county's climate policy is one that benefits all the residents of the county, and that shouldn't be sacrificed in favor of any particular groups or some kind of language like that.
Yeah.
Would capture this isn't, this is where we think about the trade-off,
Yeah,
and
okay.
this is important regardless of who it is you're talking
So I was chairman of a commission for 3 years that was constantly prorating for willing to sacrifice other other interests for our narrow perspective, which was a statutory perspective required by the Commonwealth of Virginia, actually. And I think trying to put, little political statements there, recognizing other values in letters is not a bad tactic. I mean, we have to stick to our analysis, make our points about what's good for energy. I don't see why it really hurts to leave in language saying, like, we're all for senior housing, but here's, what is wrong about this project. So in general, I mean, I also don't think it's the end of the day we take that stuff out. I think these sort of statements to soften the criticism that we're going to receive that you don't care about old folks is not a bad thing to do.
We are old folks.
I'm ready for retirement. My next job is retirement.
It's just a thought that you might want to say that you understand the special needs of an assisted living facility. That's why I asked for the
Yeah.
specification, because they've got a lot of medical equipment. Medical equipment is always energy hogs. But there are alternatives that meet multiple priorities of the counties in providing for assisted living, meeting its climate goals, that there are reasonable alternatives for them. And that way it doesn't pitch you against them.
Right.
That's nice.
I like that. I like that.
Yeah. Yeah, we understand the special needs of this population. But believe,
We don't want to be so broad and special needs of old
Yeah,
people.
right,
I mean,
yeah,
assisted living.
that leaves of senior living.
Assisted living,
Assisted living.
not just.
Yeah.
But truly, on the backup power issue, most outages, first of all, the utility is going to do everything in its power to make sure that there's not an outage. But when there is, it's typically of low duration. And if it's of long duration that would necessitate an
Or
entire
backup.
fossil plant, then that facility should be equipped to be an emergency location for a much larger segment of the county if it's going to have that level of emergency backup that can run for several days and to justify that. I see no reason why they need a gas plant.
I just say they're kind of like design and construction alternatives that meet.
They can satisfy those.
Exactly. So the
Specific
choice doesn't have
requirements.
to be binary.
Yeah.
Okay, so design and construction alternatives that can meet both.
Yeah.
Both climate and needs and climate priorities. All right,
It's a great letter, and I'm glad that we're actually saying rejecting.
any other comments?
Make a motion.
Yeah,
I'll move to approve it with the changes we've made.
Second.
all approved?
Aye.
Any object? Okay. And we will pass, and then we'll just get through updates. Carrie?
Yeah, I think, as you probably know from a previous update, the solid waste management plan for the next 20 years has been in the works, and we met on last Thursday, the solid waste management committee, which I chair. It's a committee under C2E2, expanded for the purposes of the development of this new solid waste management plan. We voted to approve the draft for public sharing. They are first going to meet with the county board to talk about some budget issues. And then I emailed and I didn't get a response today, probably because I sent it a little bit late, to find out exactly on which date it's coming out. But there will be a number of public presentations and a second round, another round of public feedback. And then the solid waste committee will meet again in December to look at new comments that may have come in. And that's the point at which it will start going more formally through the county review and approval process. And the hope and expectation is it will be ready for approval by June 2024. sure it will be approved. Yeah, we raised issues in 2 rounds, our commission and outside groups, and we got some responses to the issues that we raised. I know Joan and others were not completely happy with them, but you know, they had reasonable explanations for some of it. And you know, I think it's a solid plan. It's a framework. It doesn't mean everything that is in there will necessarily be done, but it is a framework for what is required to meet the state requirements for a solid waste management plan, and the rest of it are voluntary measures to meet the zero waste resolution that was passed by the Arlington County Board in 2015, a long time ago at this point. And numerous different efforts to move to a more zero waste approach to managing our waste and recycling. So I commend people to people's reading when it comes out, and feel free as citizens to provide comments. We as a commission, I don't think we'll have another opportunity until it comes back in December. Unless,
Well, it's gonna go back to the, yeah, so if we're gonna comment on we have to do something by November.
I'll find out tomorrow exactly how the timing is going to go.
Yeah.
On that, I should know.
So if we want to get a briefing on it.
But it's coming back to the solid waste committee to see the public comments. Yeah,
Well, but
Let me
we're part of
clarify that.
we're part of the public.
we are part of the public. That's why I'm inviting people to
Yeah.
read it as a
Again,
member
with
of the
the
public.
forestry and natural resources master plan, at this stage, we wrote a letter.
So in other words, you're saying we can do it.
I think
As
so. I
public.
think it's, you know, as much as, yeah, because otherwise, where do we have a chance to weigh in?
Would you like a formal
And I think it would be, yeah.
process, or do you want people to individually?
Well, I strongly encourage everybody on any of these public engagement opportunities to go ahead and weigh in and provide your input. Because, you know, but I think, you know, as a commission, kind of hopefully we carry some more weight. And also we can get to the county board to some sense to give them a little bit of a heads up on where we're going and where we're thinking about these things.
In fact, people can do both. They can respond as an individual, and then we can collate comments, concerns, and then send another letter. That's what we can do.
Yeah, and we can, again, we did some informal comments on the first round. The draft is probably going to look pretty much the same. So we can, you kind of look at some of those comments as well as other comments. I mean, we could you maybe ask them to come to our October meeting. If we get somebody from DC, and then we've got another busy meeting in October.
When it comes out, I could circulate
Yeah.
a week or two before our October meeting, collate
Yeah.
comments.
Or we can push it off to November, but have a letter based on what it is, and then they can brief us, and if we want to make changes.
Yeah.
To the letter.
So why don't we tentatively have on the agenda for October, solid waste Bureau? Is that okay?
Yeah. You want to reach out to them?
Looking at Jenna, I can do that.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Okay. All right, kind of number of updates, and then if anybody else has any updates, just starting to look forward to next year, and for, you know, I've been chair for 3 years, so I think just for the health of the commission, it helps to translate that. And Cindy has offered to take that on. She's been tied up for most of this year.
forever.
Well, at some point they'll kick me off the commission too. But, so, you know, my proposal will be is that going into next year, I can serve as vice chair and then be looking for somebody by the end of March or so who would want to take over as being vice chair, and then kind of work out systematically. Again, we want to make transition fairly easily, in the past. So, again, getting that up to date and being part of the decision-making and planning process, early on. Again, I'll be here until a couple, I guess, presumably they just announced that they just reappointed me yesterday or on Tuesday, so.
Oh.
Otherwise, we probably got a problem. No, I don't think there was an issue.
We will certainly need
So-
everybody's help.
Yeah,
Joan
yeah,
has
yeah.
been
Amazing job.
incredible,
Yeah.
incredible, and it's incredible knowledge, expertise, and time. So
Yeah,
we will take all of us. And thanks to Carrie and also to Doug for chairing that committee, chairing
Yeah.
committees, but we will all need to work together.
Yeah. So, the more people take on things, it makes it a lot easier. And just more the things of keeping track of overall schedules and figuring out how the county board process works and things like that.
Right.
That took me a while to kind of get up to speed. So, I mean, I kind of think 2 years as chair works well because the first year is helping to kind of get up to speed. And then the
Let's take
second
it
year,
one
you've
year
got to-
at a time.
Yeah. But anyway, so that's kind of, these is that we will be going into, we need to come up with our plans and priorities for 2024 and approve those by December. So it would be good, first kind of look at what we have up there on the website and maybe if 2 people or so can take the lead of kind of thinking through, whether or not we need to change the format. We think we got a little bit more specific of tying together things that we knew were coming up during the year, to make it a little bit more specific in terms of overall priorities and focus areas. And then there's always looking at what are the conditions and that we're serving on. So the volunteers to kind of help with that would be helpful.
I think we have a good model from this year.
Yeah.
To
Yeah, again,
update, so it may not be an
Yeah.
incredibly
don't,
burdensome
don't,
task.
don't fix what's not broken, but,
Yeah.
some things were kind of specific in terms of what we knew, and we do know we'll probably be looking at other things. And one of the things that is coming up is that the CEP will be 5 years old next year, so probably time for an update. Is there thinking that, we need a broader perspective of climate action, that kind of captures and integrates a lot of these issues, rather than the CEP, which some things seem to get a little bit more narrowly focused. Like, for example, I mean, the solid waste plan is a good example because they don't really address kind of the carbon footprint of everything we throw away. So, do we want to start thinking a little bit more broadly about that? Thinking more broadly about embedded carbon in general.
CEP, Community Energy Plan for some of our newer
Yeah.
folks.
Yeah. So, I mean, the carbon neutrality goal is good, but, and thinking more detailed about what that actually means and focusing on some of the things that we could be, I think. Hopefully people find interesting the article I sent around about some of those other cities. That's great. And so while we'll be platinum, I think we can learn an awful lot from these groups.
I think that the automated dashboard, the greenhouse gas inventory broken down into subsectors is going to be important too. It might be a great reference to look at because you're going to start seeing in granular detail what are the real sources of the
Now,
greenhouse
do
gas
we have
emissions.
the data updated now beyond 2016, which I think was the last one? And when will the dashboard be out?
They're working on it now. They're probably going to beta test it in October, and our goal is to have it public by November 1st.
Okay, this update is the Fine Langston Boulevard is going to the Planning Commission and the County Board next month for the request to advertise. So it's basically a 2-part process. But I will speak at both the Planning Commission and I'll speak at the County Board meeting. And is based on what we said in our letter. I kind of prefer, I thinking of just saying is we don't think it's ready for prime time. unless they've changed it tremendously in the last 2 months, which I kind of doubt. So, and there was a county board meeting not a couple weeks ago when they're raising some of the same, I think, questions that we get raised. I was on vacation, so I didn't get there, so. So anyway, I will go and speak at both of those meetings. One little issue, and kind of maybe it's worth a letter for us to do, is about a county policy on demolition of buildings, to be very focused that it needs to be deconstruction and recycling of materials over just demolition.
It's an important issue.
Yeah.
Yeah, because what brought this up is that the county's now purchased several homes near my neighborhood. And it's for overland relief, and they will be, as they talked about it, demolishing those properties. I don't know exactly what that's. And then also around the ACC, there's one building they're planning on demolishing, which I actually raised at the county board meeting when they talked about that, but they need to talk about deconstruction. So at least getting them to change the language on that, but that actually should be reflected, I think, in policy.
But it's much more than language. It's a much more time consuming process to
Right,
reconstruct the building.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay, and again, Mark did send out some things on SPRC processes. I think we'll cover it right now for what's in process, but there are a number that are coming up. So take a look at them, volunteer to help do that. Anybody that hasn't done it, we're here to help. There's several of us that have done it.
And as a new person, it's a great way to get familiar with the chart, and it's a good way to get involved.
And there were good recommendations, by the way, on how we need to improve our process and our chart and those things that we should definitely still think about.
Yeah, again, I think, streamlining that chart will help in the future, but we'll wait until they update the green building incentive policy before we do anything. Anybody got anything else? Last words.
I just want to say,
Eric, Jonathan? Any last words?
Nothing from my side, thank you.
I was just going to say that I went to the YMCA SPRC, and they got a lot of negative neighborhood comment, and the project they brought back was so much worse.
So much worse.
You can see the neighbors, they were building an 80,000, the YMCA, that's the community benefit. They were building an 80,000 square foot facility, and now they got all this negative neighbor comment. They're only building 50,000. So they've lost 30,000 square feet of community benefit.
Yeah.
So we should use our power wisely. That wasn't us, but as people comment.
Jonathan?
Yeah, just quickly. So I know she's spoken with a number of people on the commission, but I was just talking with Jackie Snelling
Can you speak
this
up?
morning.
I can't hear you.
You can't hear? I was talking with Jackie Snelling this morning. Can y'all hear me? Yeah, and she's on the Civic Federation. Yeah, and she was talking a lot about an issue that we've mentioned sometimes here, heat islands, and that and she says it's something that they're talking about in the Civic Federation and concerned about, and so it just thought it's something that.
Okay, I'm sorry, staff needs to go.
Okay.
Yeah,
Something for us to talk about in the future. So that's it.